I want to tell you about a way that I stumbled upon. It's an easy way to do Holy Grail or day to night or night to day time lapses. When I do time lapses, as I explained in the last video, I put out as many cameras as I have. That way you maximize the number of time lapses you can get. You can use different focal lengths, perspectives, and compositions. It's really going to improve your profits when you're selling stock video. But the problem is, for example, if I'm doing a day to night time lapse of the sunset and then Milky Way, I frame up the camera where the Milky Way is going to appear, and I do everything I can to make sure that's going to be a good video. But I've got cameras all over the mountainside or hillside or sand dunes or wherever I'm at. I've got cameras all up and down there. And so generally you would put the camera into manual. Then generally with these two wheels in the front and this wheel in the back, you would adjust the aperture and you would adjust the shutter speed so that you could slowly change the exposure composition, the exposure triangle. You could even use this wheel down here to adjust the ISO. But the problem is I've got cameras all over the hill and I can't do that. If I go to one camera to the next, I can't get back to the first camera in time to change it again as the exposure ramp, as it gets darker, or in the morning as it gets lighter. So sometimes I can't do that, and so I'll put it on. For most all cameras, you can put it on A for aperture priority, or in Canon that's AV. As it gets dark, I'll simulate this by putting my hand over it. You can see that the shutter speed down in the lower left-hand corner, the shutter speed changes. It goes from 160, and as I put my hand over, or as I use this variable ND filter, you can see it goes to 100 to 80 to 40 and so on, and it gets darker. So that will automatically ramp the shutter speed. So what I'm doing is I'm doing two time lapses. I'm doing the sunset or the daytime until it gets to the blue hour, and then in the blue hour I'm going to manual and I'm setting these exact settings. All right. Now here's something that I learned on accident, which might help you if you have a Sony camera. I've never seen this done by anyone else, and I came across it on accident. But if you put the camera into P mode. Okay, now this is on P mode. Let me set the ISO to 640. You can see that it's got the aperture at f6.3, the shutter speed at 1/320th of a second. So it's 1/320th of a second. Now watch what happens when I change this ND filter. As it gets darker, not only does the shutter speed change, but the aperture changes automatically. If I put my hand over it, you can see it could go down to 6, 7, it could go down to anything. It could go down to 15, 20 seconds. This P mode on a Sony camera will automatically and very smoothly ramp your exposure and give you a very smooth transition timeline that looks as good as anything you can do manually, in my opinion. That way I have two time lapses. I have a time lapse which very smoothly ramps the exposure during the greatest change between daylight, sunset, sunrise, twilight, dawn, between those hours. And in a city where there's plenty of lights, you can do that the whole time. You can leave it, a Sony camera, on P. Or if you have another camera that doesn't do that, like a Sony does, you can leave it on A and it'll do really well. It'll do pretty well. But for Milky Way, I'll start with P. I'll do that to sunset if it's a camera that I just can't get to in time to ramp manually, and then I can go when it gets dark, I can change it to M, and I do 2 different time lapses, one with the Milky Way and one with the exposure changing from day to sunset to twilight. That gives you 2 time lapses. Now let me show you on the computer what I do with those 2 time lapses. Okay, this is a video, 2 videos that I took just a few days ago. I've already uploaded it to Blackbox to sell. And you can see here I have one that is of the daytime to twilight, well, to sunset, and then to twilight. And then what happens once the sun goes down? Those settings aren't going to do real well for the Milky Way. Then when it gets dark, I set the camera to manual. With this camera, I'll set the shutter speed to 20 seconds. I'll set the ISO to 3200. I'll leave the white balance at 4000 Kelvin, and the interval will be probably 23 seconds. 3 seconds to make sure the raw file is written to the camera and the camera doesn't get behind and get confused. And then I have this time lapse. So now you have 2 time lapses. Well, all I need to do to join them together is I have them all overlap by a few seconds. And I'll go to the one on top, and I'll go to the beginning of that timeline. You can do this on any editor. And I'll put the opacity to 0. And then I'll go to the end of the other time lapse, this frame right here, and I'll change the opacity to 100. You can see it puts in 2 keyframes. One keyframe has the opacity at 0, and the other one has the opacity at 100, so it's slowly increasing the opacity. At the video underneath it, I'll put the opacity, at the end of that video, I'll put it at, we're at the end of the video, I'll put it, the opacity at 0, and I'll go to the beginning of the clip above and change the opacity to this to 100, and you get, again, you see it has 2 keyframes. So it's slowly going to reduce, it's slowly going to make the video underneath transparent and reveal the video on top. But when you play it beginning to end, which we'll do, I'll put it in and out marker there. Actually, I'll go 1 frame more so I don't get that bright light. That was me probably walking over with a headlamp on to turn the camera off. Now when I play this together and render it out, you can see that I have a full time lapse that goes day to night, that I didn't have to manually ramp, and I get the Milky Way perfectly where I want it over that beach gazebo. This was taken in Oman, which is a beautiful country. And so this is an easy way, a very easy way to do day to night time lapses. I even call it the lazy way. I don't necessarily think it's the best way, but I think it's a very good way to maximize your time. If you have a lot of cameras out, or if you don't want to fiddle with them, this is a great way to do a day to night Holy Grail time lapse. I hope you found this helpful. Please leave a like and subscribe, and ring the bell so that you can receive notification for further content.